Welcome to the 47th episode of the Known Pleasures podcast. On this podcast, we discuss the post-punk and new wave eras of the late 70s and early 80s. To promote the upcoming birthday party documentary, Mutiny in Heaven, we've secured an interview with one of the founding members. So I'll leave it up to Mark, who's champing at the bat, to introduce today's interviewee.
On our birthday party episode, I said something like, there's never been an Australian band before or since quite like them, and I stand by that. We recently had the opportunity to interview drummer Phill Calvert, who told us about the boys' early school days, his departure from the band, and why he knew eventually Nick would go solo. Ladies and gentlemen, release the bats. Well, hi, Phil. My name's Mark. To my right is Patrick.
Howdy.
Graham is off camera producing this particular episode. We're from Known Pleasures. We are really, really grateful to have you on, and thank you so much for your time. We recently saw the movie, all three of us, and obviously we're big fans and we enjoyed it. We saw it, Graham and I, over in the Cremorne at the Sydney premiere.
Oh, were you there that night with the Q&A?
Yeah. That was great. I felt like you could have got a bit more in there.
That was one of the better Q&A sessions. It was quite lively and such a beautiful old cinema too. It's great to see, people going to the movies in a big room with a big screen, and it gives you much more of a feel. I could have handled the sound. Most of the screenings I've been at, well, I might be getting old and deaf, but I reckon they could have pumped the sound a little more.
I thought the same.
Or like in the room kind of thing.
Yeah, it needed to be louder. That was my only complaint about it. But you must have been pleased with the amount of people there. I turned up thinking maybe there's 40 or 50 people, and I got there and it was like, wow, we had trouble getting a seat. It's fantastic.
It was good. And I think that added to the sense of occasion. In Melbourne, it had already been at the Melbourne International Film Festival launch. And so people who were dead keen had gone to see it there. And then there'd also been an affiliated with MIF screening at the Forum Theatre, which is like a live music venue, like quite a big room.
Yeah, it's massive.
So I thought, but Sydney hadn't had a chance to see it. So I was away for the MIF thing. I was overseas, and for the Forum thing. So I wasn't around for those Q&As. And then when it got to the ones where I was around, it was smaller. I mean, like the Nova, it's probably a couple of hundred in there or something like that. It was great. But, the Dead Keen fans had already kind of in Melbourne, where there are a few, were quite, had seen it, right? But in Sydney, that one you went to at Cremorne, that was the first time that anyone had a chance to see it. And I had quite a few people on the free list. I think that might have helped as well. Like
a few hundred.
The production company had most of the people involved with the back of the house editing and things like that were in there as well. So I think that put a few bums on seats as well. But it was great vibe in the room, and Tracy's old girlfriend Caitlin was there with her current partner and stuff, and so that really added to the whole sense of occasion of the evening.
Yeah.
Are you happy with it? I mean, that was my first question I wanted to ask you about it, obviously.
Look, yeah, I'm really happy with it. I think that Ian's done an amazing job because, you've got to it's like making a record. It's like writing a book. It's like you can only put so much in. You've got an hour and 40. You've got to cover, kind of a 5 or 6 year period. What do you leave in and what do you leave out? So I think that he's done a great job of crafting the film. And I think that one of the great indicators of that for me is that people that are now friends of mine that I know that don't know anything about the band or anything about my past have gone and seen the movie, and just as a piece of cinema have really enjoyed it. So they've got the story, they've got the vibe. They weren't there at the time, but they go, hey, this, it really works. I didn't fall asleep. I didn't go, this is boring. I didn't go, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They just got it. So I think in that way, it's really, really successful. I'm really happy that it's been framed as a thing about a band that's 5 individual members rather than it being about this is what Nick Cave used to do before he got to be Nick Cave kind of thing. And so I think that's really successful. I think they put great effort into trying to give a sense of Tracy, which I think was really difficult in the fact that, of course, that he died when he was 28 and that he there's very little footage, if any, of him. And I think that was great where they used the animation as a device. Try and fill some of those gaps. And the other one too is that there was in earlier pre-production, and like I've been involved since the get-go with this whole thing, there was talk about, we'll use kind of like VR, virtual reality, or they'll use some kind of other, thing to try and like emulate these people. And I'm going, that sounds really fucking scary, like the concept that you're going to try and have these avatars and things like that. So the animation was a really nice device to kind of like make that have a feeling of being a thing. So yeah, that was I thought that worked well. Look, is it perfect? What is? Nothing is, and I think it just gives a good sense of the time and a good sense of kind of like the dynamic between the people and the focus that was really, really strongly on the music.
You've seen the film a few times now, I guess, or a few hundred times. And how are you?
I don't. Sometimes I turn up for the beginning and the end. I've seen it all the way through, I think, 3 times, but I have seen it many iterations prior during the editing process. And even when I saw it for the first time in the cinema, there were some additions and cuts that weren't even in the last cut that I saw. So, sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, in writing, like people writing books, they talk about killing your darlings, as in, like the fantastic line in a paragraph that you've got to cut out because it doesn't quite work in the kind of fuller context of it. Is there something that was left out of the final cut that you think, I wish that was in there?
I think it was alluded to in the Q&A that you guys saw at Cremorne, that the ability to include a lot of the girls and the girlfriends and the people that were around the band was difficult. And then I think that was made even more difficult by the fact that Anita passed away during pre-production. She was also someone who wasn't particularly keen on doing any kind of press or things like that anyway. So it might have been difficult to really get her on board with that. So I think the other thing too, which I think may also have come out, is that it spins a very, very good tale about how desperate things were in the first year or so in London, which they were, but they were more desperate for some people than others. And I think people who are more resilient and cope well under stress, people like myself or Mick Harvey, we didn't actually, be rolling in the gutters, starving in London in the first. We got jobs, we held our shit together. But I mean, that doesn't make a good movie. It's like, I mean, and in fact, it wasn't all, frickin' beer and Skittles. We were struggling. Don't get me wrong, but I quite enjoyed being in London. Where you'll often hear Roland or quoted in and out of context, and in this film and other places, bemoaning how misery-ridden he was in the first couple of years in London, but he got to like it later, kind of thing. But it was like I never really felt that once I got to London and I got settled and I found my feet. And yes, we were working on the band. But, I made other friends and associates and eventually forged, quite a good kind of life in London, which is why, as you would have observed in the movie, I said, oh, no, I'm fine. I'll just stay here, maintain my base in England. I'll just travel back and forth to Berlin. Obviously, I was missing some context.
Yes.
Certainly in terms of that year in London, the way you're describing it is much less dramatic than, having a band member suffering from severe malnutrition for a start. Or, for instance, I think it might have been...
You've got choices. You can spend your money on food or you can spend your money on some other stuff,
Yeah.
Either will alleviate hunger, but that's another thing altogether.
Yeah. Did Nick say that Roland's attitude to London was that it had been designed specifically to taunt him or something along those lines?
I mean, that is... look, I mean... I'm not going to pile on Rolly,
No,
not
at all.
It's like, people's coping mechanisms are different. It was a tough time. And it was just something where I don't think he was necessarily had the armor to deal with it. I mean, it's really, look, let's get this in perspective. We were a bunch of guys at 21 years old, right? We'd been going, since 77, 78 or something like that. We'd been, operating in Australia in a really vibrant music scene where, okay, we were, not part of the mainstream, but we were gigging and we had a kind of like support mechanism around it of fans, other musicians, people who were trying to, chasing similar artistic pursuits, right? So that was all great vibes in Melbourne, and it's warm in summer and it ain't that cold in winter.
Yeah.
And you can get by and you can go get dinner at mum's house if you're starving, even if you are living in a flat in St Kilda, right? Take those 21-year-old boys, stick them all on a plane, and now you're on the other side of the planet with little or no support. And you're trying the best you can to make your music happen for the world, or for you. Actually, you're just trying to make the music. That's what that's what's going on. And I mean, it would be pretty, it's pretty easy to draw the line where you go, this is absolute hellhole, and it's it's really pressing down on me personally. And and at every turn, I mean, look, you got no idea how weird London was back then. You're trying to open a bank account. You can't just walk into, the CBA and go, oh, here's my driver's license. Can I open a savings account? No, man. It's like, oh, have you got a job? It's who's going to vouch for you? It's just a bank account. No, you can't do that. So at every twist there was stuff, and it was complicated, and that's some of the things that maybe is for volume 2 of the Mark Mordew book or something like that. You can't get that into a film. And if I drilled down into every question you have about the movie, for every answer I give you, you'd add an hour to that film. Maybe we're going to get back to the film.
Well, can I just ask you, February 1980, you're about to morph from the Boys Next Door to the birthday party, the great exodus to London. Everybody had to go to London. That was what everybody did back then. What made you guys think that you were going to make a success of it when so many before you and after have failed? I mean, really, it's, it's a big call. It
is. I don't like to draw on the kind of like concept of best and better or anything like that. I don't know, we had some kind of belief structure that what we were doing would fit, or actually what we were doing would actually be better than what we were hearing. And while we were influenced by it, there's no doubt that we thought that if we could take our brand of what we were doing there, that it would at least get up and fly, which... Actually, we were kind of right. So that was, and I think it was incredible self-belief more than anything else. And I think maybe arriving in London initially might have put a bit of a dent in that self-belief. I remember I think the second night we were in London, it's spoken about in the movie that we went to a gig a few weeks in at the Lyceum where there was a bunch of bands playing. But the second night, another Melbourne expat, a girl called Vicky Bonet, said, oh, I can get you in to see The Cure at the Marquee. So we went to see The Cure at the Marquee in Wardour Street. And this was like the Three Imaginary Boys kind of era Cure, three
the best Cure.
Super tough, really good. Just like the record. And I'm standing in the audience going, if every band in England can actually play as good as this, we're really up against it. But fortunately, they couldn't. And we had hundreds and hundreds of gigs behind us. So once we did start to play, we are actually quite a well-oiled tight machine and play well together. But and then, subsequently, a couple of weeks later, we went to a gig at the Lyceum and sort of, Teardrop Explodes, that kind of idea. And I remember seeing early on Susie and the Banshees at the Music Machine, and they were just not appalling, just not a well-honed live act. They could make great records. They looked good. It was all, the sound was coming on stage. I was going, what went on in between songs, whatever. It was just, slightly shambolic. And you go, this is okay in London. This is okay, So I think we just believed. We thought we had a thing, and we thought we would stand apart.
With your time in England, in London that year when you only played like 10 or 11 gigs, were you constantly sending your tape around, to the various places and they were saying, this sucks, or what was the...
That's the thing that I suppose, that's as a personal aside, the thing I think is kind of like would have been a nice little sort of chit-chat in the movie was that, okay, what happened was that once I had a job and we were settled and we were living in our shitty house and all that kind of stuff, and we had some records that we had made in Australia, and we were trying to get those to John Peel. And then we did the thing where we self-released Mr. Clarinet. So it was financed by Missing Link, the manufacturer of it, but they were pressed in London, and then X amount of them we shipped back to Australia. Keith, who owned Missing Link and was our manager, used to regularly buy records from Rough Trade, who were also a wholesaler as well as a record label and also a retail record shop. And so we took a bunch of them down to Rough Trade. They shipped those back to Australia, to Keith. They kept a bunch of themselves for them to distribute. And so it was like they were selling it as an indie single that was put out by a band, which they did heaps of then. And so we went... every Monday evening, I would go to Portland Place, which is where the BBC offices were, and I'd wait outside, foolishly at the front door, hoping to snag John Peel on his way to do his radio show. And so I turned up week after week after week, and then eventually the guy who was the security guard. So it's like a job at the they have names for like a warden or something at the BBC. It's this guy in a uniform, looks like a cop but isn't, has BBC logos on him and stuff like that. Said, "Oh look, you keep turning up. This is kind of a bit fucking sad." He goes up. He just come in through the front door, but he goes, "See that guy there? That's John Waters. He's his producer."
Wow.
And I said, he said, no, he said, the security guy said, "Give me the records and I'll give them to John Waters with, and so basically after a month or so of doing this, and then Peel played, Mr. Clarinet on BBC One.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's the kind of thing where you go, oh, well, if I didn't stand there every Monday night, maybe they wouldn't have taken pity on me and they wouldn't have made sure that the producer got the record and it wouldn't have got to Peel. But maybe it would have eventually through Rough Trade or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. But, I like to think that, a bit of perseverance paid off there kind of thing. And then that was really for me, and I think for the band, the biggest coup of that whole 4 year, besides the 7 gigs that we played, was that Peel picked up on us, played that record, put us in the studio to do one of his BBC recording sessions, which gave us 4 songs which became demos for the Prayers on Fire record. That also, the fact that happened meant that, through another set of associations that Ivo at 4AD picked up, put out the Friend Catcher single. And, by the time we left England to come back to Australia, I think it was, number 4 or something on the NME chart. So we're going, bang, we're off, So it was, hang on, we got off the track. What was the question?
No, that was pretty much it.
No, that was on track. On track.
It's been an interesting and a kind of joyous experience, this whole thing, like the whole movie thing and the whole revisiting that time, especially the things around Tracy and Roland But even the reconnection, the time that I've had to spend with Mick,
Yeah.
because we've been involved in all these Q&A things, and then we were up in Sydney. I said, "You want to have breakfast tomorrow?" And then we sat around for 2 hours or more having breakfast and coffee and stuff. And that because, as oft mentioned in the movie, we never had a band meeting. We really discussed stuff. Things just happened and we did stuff, right? And so everything that happened after I left the band, I've never had a chance to ask anybody about. So I was able to talk to Mick about the whole move to Berlin, the whole how that went, where they lived, how the other gigs panned out after that, how they transitioned from doing the songs that I played that probably no one else could really play to, moving those out of the set or into the set, or which ones Mick chose to do and how that all worked. And then the great revelation to myself that Roland never actually moved to Berlin. So the bit where he's bitching about Berlin, about, it's terrible I'm living in, is because he and Genevieve maintained their base in London, which is what
you wanted to do.
And but then so Roland was only ever there when they were gigging or recording and stuff, and then would go back to London. And I think that might have added to the tension. That was the kind of, and I think the movie does sort of like tread that path of going, it was kind of an inevitable disintegration. Like, so, okay, I went first, and then, then the next guy off, the next cab off the rank was Rolly and stuff like that. Yeah. And I have recently, I think it was, I know it was in the Sydney Morning Herald. I think it was for The Age or The Guardian. I did an interview where basically somebody asked me about that, and I said, ever since probably I was in high school, I kind of always knew it would be Nick would go solo. I've followed enough music all my life. I worked in record stores. I was mad like reader of rock bios, and I'm a mad studier of album sleeves and who played what where and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And you just see certain people. It's like you're going, no, it's going to be, Nick's going to go and do the Nick thing. And I kind of knew that all along. I would have been quite happy to go along for the ride, and I would have been dug to have played on a lot of that stuff. But it was just, I think that's what was happening. I think it was just going, Roland was writing very personal stuff. I don't think Nick wanted to sing songs about Roland's girlfriend.
Really? One thing that strikes me particularly about your band is a bunch of schoolboys. And it is that kind of schoolboy thing.
Let's go private schoolboy, shall we?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, both Mark and myself went to kind of similar, like private boarding school kind of situations. And in fact, we went to the same school when we were 12 years old. So
in Ballarat, though.
In Ballarat.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Yeah.
You're probably really good footy players. So.
Well, no, we were more interested in the stuff that gets you beaten up in those schools.
Sorry, that was us. Like, even at our school, it was this crazy situation where we roamed around our secondary boys' school as the likely targets for beatings. Notice the guys who hung out in the art department at lunchtime, albeit smoking dope or whatever. It was like that was our world was music and theatre and literature, and it sounds all kind of wanky, but it certainly wasn't that much. No one in the first 11, put it that way, or the first 15 or the first 18.
Were you a gang at school? Like, was the hierarchy established there within the group that went on to become the Birthday Party?
We all hung out together. I mean, that group of people at high school was quite distinct. Not so much our bass player at that point in time, but certainly Nick, Mick, Tracy, John, the original lead guitarist, myself, another handful of guys, a guy called David Green, a couple of people, Craig McGee, Craig, some of these guys ended up at our early sort of punky gigs. And so, Craig McGee's younger brother started Shock Records. They were people who were really much more interested in counterculture, music, art. That was the kind of thing. But it was that time. You guys are probably my age or a bit younger. I don't know. It's kind of like it felt at that time, and it's quite disheartening right now because it felt at that time we were going to get all that shit right. We'd come out of Vietnam. We were there was going to be, better rights for women. There was going to be free medical. There was going to be free university. There was going to be. We were looking at a brighter future for everybody, and it feels like we kind of missed that boat. I thought that by the time I'm my age now, my gay friends would be married to my gay, whoever they wanted to, that women would have equal pay and rights and stuff like that, that there'd be no racial discrimination, that everyone would have just kind of worked that shit out. We would have got smart enough to deal with that. If that's what it felt like.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like that's kind of what you felt like you were were getting there in Australia, but if we got out of Australia, it was probably already better else in the world. And of course, you arrive elsewhere in the world, and that maybe isn't the case. But anyway, but back to the movie.
Well, I just wanted to talk to you about that year in London. So it's a very important year in the band's life because what happened between leaving and coming back and starting to work on Prayers on Fire, it's like a completely different band. Did that make you that year, that suffering, that what happened?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we got there and saw it wasn't all that we thought it would be cracked up to be. I think one of the good bad things is the limitations around our ability to be able to rehearse and our ability to be able to play live really meant that whenever we got the opportunity to do any of that kind of stuff, it was really, really fucking important to us, right? And, it's even, you can hear me voicing over in the movie I talk about. I say, I remember Nick sitting in the front, the only instruments available where there was two guitars, in the house, electric guitars, not even, you couldn't even hardly hear them. But Nick is sitting there, writes the bass line to Nick the Stripper, the bass line to King Inc., the bass line to I'm Going to Say Yard. He comes up with, the whole thing where we had such a long established relationship of being able to work with one another and being able to even verbalize what we wanted, Nick could say, I want something that swings, and I want to go boom, doom, 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 just descending thing over and over and over again. And then I'm going to sing this over the top, and that's Figure of Fun. But so when you get together in a rehearsal studio, that's the kind of information that you've got to go around. And if a band knows how to do that, they know how to do that. So with limited information, whenever we got to rehearse, we came up with this stuff. It's like no one stopped writing and no one stopped being exposed to creative stuff. We just stopped playing as much as we did in Australia. And as you know, back then, bands played all the time. In the year prior to going to the UK, I think we played like 120 shows in Australia because we're trying to raise money for plane tickets and stuff. You talk to bands these days, especially, I work with young musicians making records and stuff now, and you tell them, we'd play, 2 shows in the night, and we'd play 3-4 shows a week, and they look at you like you're from Mars. Yeah, every week, the whole year. They're going, Yeah, it was. I think it was. Maybe it was a cathartic experience. Maybe it was a bit of shock to the system, and maybe it was a bit of an influence of being in that environment. But a lot of people laud Junkyard as being this kind of great record, which has got some great tracks on it. But I think that Prayers on Fire was like, okay, we were doing the hee-haw stuff and everything like that, but there's this real switch, you can decide. Someone flicked the switch. We became a different band. And by the way, the whole it just magically happened on the plane that the band's name changed from the Boys Next Door to the Birthday Party is total BS because it was worked out before we left Australia. And, And even I had a weird realization the other night. There was a gig on the 81-82 summer tour of Australia when we were recording Junkyard. And I think we played, I'm going to say it was the Sydney Trade Union Club, and we played a blinder. It was incredible. And we came off stage, and Nick basically turned to the rest of the band and said, well, we've pretty much done this, so now we should do something else. He said, let's change the name of the band again. But I went, it's just being Bowie, it's just being, it's just like, let's flip a coin and do the other thing, I don't think he was saying let's play Cabaret, but I think he was already thinking at that point in time, things have got to change. We've got, it's time to flip things around.
Mark, you saw
I was going to say,
play in that tour.
I just wanted to say, firstly, Prayers on Fire is a landmark album, and as a 15-year-old, whatever I was when I heard it, it blew me away. And the fact that it came from Australia was even better. It still stands up. So I would agree with you versus Junkyard as well. Just wanted to get that in there. I did see you in January 82 in Brisbane. And was a young lad, last year of high school.
So January of 82?
January 82, yeah, at the New York Hotel. And you missed the first song, apparently. According to what I read today, you missed on the first song, and Mick played drums for some reason. And then you came
okay, so what happened at that point in time, and you can see there's actually some footage in the film where this is happening. So written a new song. We were in the recording studio, and the whole idea for the song was there. Nick kind of had the lyrics and was going on, and I wasn't getting a part. And my most hated thing is writing in the studio when the clock is ticking. And in those days, you're talking, back then, $1,000 a day plus engineer plus tape at $200 a roll for 2-inch. It was like, and that was a lot of money back then. And we were in the best studio in Melbourne, and Keith's paying for it, and it's all going down. But I was trying stuff, and it wasn't coming together. And so Mick goes, "Hang on, give me a crack." He goes like, and we get through a take. I said, "That feels good. That feels good." Everybody in the room went, "Yeah." So I said, "Do it. Let's put it down." So they put it down. Mick played drums, right? So I didn't know this song. So for the rest of that tour, if we did Hamlet, what they did was to make it easy for the rest of the set, we'd open with that, because then Mick could start on drums, and then didn't have to go back and forth from guitar and stuff like that. And so then he'd play that song. I'd come in and play the drums, and then, so I wasn't late. I wasn't, out.
That's what I was wondering.
I know. Surely I was out the back with some, whatever. But no, that was not the case. It was just it was in the best interest of the set and the best interest of the song. Yeah. By the time we got back to England at the end of that, I was playing that song, because it wasn't like I was incapable of playing it. It's that we had to come up with the part at the time, and we had to put it down in the studio. So, and the studio version is Mick on drums. But yeah, later live versions is me. Same with Dead Joe. Initial recorded version is Mick. There's since another recorded version with me, which is available on other, recordings, blah, blah, blah. And that's one of the bad things too. The whole of that became very shambolic, the whole Junkyard session, and then the whole thing we hadn't finished. We didn't have enough tracks to finish an album. Tracy got arrested. We went back to the UK. We had to finish these, whatever songs. We did these 2 extra tracks, which I consider both to be not very good, which is Kiss Me Black and Cupid Doll. And even I think Junkyard only stands up well today as an LP, because in the latter versions they put Blast Off and Release the Bats onto the track listing, which wasn't on the original.
I have a question that might last less than 2 minutes, like question and answer, because you can just say, no, it's nonsense. I read something in a No,
it's nonsense.
There you go. That's not true.
I stand corrected. Nicky Danger.
Ring any bells?
Oh, Nicky Danger and the Bleeding Hearts.
Is
that it?
Yeah.
Was that
featuring Buddy Love on bass and Phill Thump on drums?
Really? So July 77?
It's true.
Around then?
It was a concert. We didn't have a name. We did have the whole idea. They go, there was this high school band. They were called the Boys Next Door. Now we had some dreadful names. We had names that sounded like, like Alex Harvey band songs. Names that sounded. I remember we played one school dance and we were called the Magic Puddings or something. It's high school. It's not. And we weren't. Supremely cool. We didn't wake up in our nappies, dressed in black in Chelsea boots. It wasn't.
Nick might have. I don't know.
In his dreams.
In his dreams.
Look, in his dreams, he'd have had a twin that was stillborn before him. But come on,
that's great.
It's all becomes part of the mythology, and I think you've got to kind of give that a little bit of space. And look, it was a difficult time and it was a good time, and there were tough times and there were great times. And there was the thing is that we didn't all get up in the morning going, hey, in 40 years' time, someone's going to make a movie and I'm going to be talking to them about it in an interview. You got up in the morning and you said, I'm more excited about that song than I was yesterday. I really want to, fucking work out how to record that, or I've got a good idea for the middle eight, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's more what it was about at any given time, really. It was about the music.
January 82, New York Hotel, Brisbane. I was a young lad of 16 or 17. I have to say that gig has remained in my mind ever since. It's probably the most terrified I've ever been at a gig in my life. I just did not know what was going to happen next. And
it was just how it happened on the night. It was just very much if the energy was in the room and the energy was going off, then it would infect us, and then that would reinfect the audience, and you get this kind of situation where it was like a feedback loop, a self-fulfilling prophecy that everything was going to go fucking nuts. And it didn't go nuts every night. It went more nuts some nights than other nights. And I think that one of the bad things that did happen out of it, which I think the doco kind of gets its head around, is it became that seemed to kind of take over the attitude of the attending audience was, well, let's see what happens tonight, because I'm up for it. And I'm going to, if Nick's going to come out here, then I'm going to go back there. And that became quite adversarial, like a bit of biff between us and the band. That was never the intention. The intention is to get the reaction and the interaction, not to start a fight. And I think as the energy levels went up, then that really exacerbated that stuff. And I think that's one of the things that long term, even after I left, I think that became part of the thing that started to destroy the joy about being on stage. And the birthday party was very much a live band. I think your difference between seeing it and actually buying the records is a very different thing. And the records are good, don't get me wrong, but the live thing was often where it was most powerful. And then it became a thing of like, I think Nick's next stage after that with the Bad Seeds almost became a studio band that then took another 10 years to learn how to become a live band. And now he's got, both of it going on. He's got an amazing live machine now. But I think he took a step back because of that stuff, because of that. Look at that 80, 81, when we played in Brisbane and stuff, that's nothing compared to the shit that went down in the 80, 81, 82 tour, when it was hot and sweaty and you were heading much more into the junkyard sort of like phase. Those shows got really mad.
Well, I have to say it's a show that I still talk about to this day, and I've seen a lot of shows, and it's right up there in my top 10 for something.
It's interesting because both in some of the Q&A stuff, both the director of the movie Ian White and Mark Mordew, who was moderating some of those discussions, was saying that they both had a similar experience to yourself when attending, gigs around that stage, as they were in the room, and that the fear was palpable prior to us arriving on stage, and then the band playing kind of broke some of that tension, but then there was still this thing in the air that you didn't know what was going to happen next. I'm very excited, to hear people talk like that, and to feel that people were that affected by the music we were playing. I mean, that's a joy to me, because that's pretty much what we set out to do.
Well, you certainly achieved it.
Let's see what can happen tonight.
Well, Mark was braver than I was. I didn't even dare turn up. We're the same age. We were living in different cities at the time. But yeah, as a 17-year-old or whatever, there was no way I was going to go and see the birthday party. I'd heard your songs on 3RRR and 3PBS, and I'd seen that film clip and Nick the Stripper, and not least on Countdown. I think there was a snippet of it played.
A snippet, yeah.
Yeah, on the humdrum segment.
Yes, because, hometown boys make good, and Molly going, yes, and I always knew they would. I think that's something that astounded people back in Australia, and particularly in our old stomping ground of Melbourne, that people went, oh, Jesus, that something's actually going on, kind of thing. It's really funny. Okay, so Keith Glasser was our, albeit let's call manager, but more just like great supporter kind of thing, and a truly magnificent human being and great bloke. Basically put his nuts on the line to get us where we were going. And then once we were there, and you might say he then left us to fester in our own whatever, because we had to work it out for ourselves. But he was still funding all our recordings and all that kind of stuff. He basically did an amazing job of PR while we were away, so that by the time we got back, I remember turning up to the Crystal Ballroom to, I don't know, with sound check or to turn up to the show, and there was queues down the street. I'm always going, well, who's playing tonight, kind of thing, but of course it was us. But Keith also, to his credit, got us out of our deal with Mushroom, and he, people laughed at him. He said, oh, these guys, they're going to be kind of like the Easy Beats. Everyone said they're never going to make it if they go to London. And he goes, the birthday party are going to go to London and they're going to fucking go off. And Gudinski and people like that said, oh, well, over to you, buddy, because I don't know how to do that shit. I'm not going to get involved in that. So, we'll all stand on the sidelines and watch you drown. And, they were wrong.
It was quite something, I think, for Ian Meldrum to play a segment of your song on the most popular television program in Australia as well. It was quite brave of him, even if he was taking credit for it, because there wouldn't have been many 8 or 9 or 10-year-old kids watching, like suburban kids around Australia watching, what, I really like that Nick the Stripper song.
The craziest thing about all of that, which I always found just like so, which actually was probably grist to the mill, as they say, was of course that Countdown wouldn't play Shivers. So while we were still signed to Mushroom and did the second side of the Door record, and Shivers was picked as a single, they would only play it on night moves. They wouldn't play it during primetime television because of the opening line, I've been contemplating suicide. I've been contemplating suicide. Of course, second line said, but it really doesn't suit my style. But it really doesn't suit my style. Well, at the meantime, the knack of singing My Sharona about, I'm going to get it up here, my little, like this guy, wait till I get my hands on you, My Sharona kind of thing. And you go, this guy's going, I'm, a poor, dark, somber soul who's, madly in love with you. And I've got this picture in my wallet and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's a real, teen angst kind of song. Could have been a massive anthem, pretty the fucking Screaming Jets crucified it years later. But, it's like, That should have been on Countdown. And the fact that they even played 15 seconds of Nick the Stripper is only that they kind of wanted to be involved and say, Aussie guys, mate. They barely gave the Saints any airtime for the fact that they, were charting, got signed by EMI in the UK, not EMI in Australia. They barely gave any airtime to, the fact that bands like, Birdman could tour in fucking Holland and Germany and pull hundreds of people and sell records and stuff that. It was like, it was a fake construct, But the thing is, we would have been happy if they had played Shivers on Countdown and it had been a hit. That would have been awesome. But you know what? That might have destroyed the thing that actually ended up coming next. The fact that they went no and no and no. Said, well, there's no point persevering. Let's just fucking do what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Credibility was so crucial in those days, and the music magazines, decided who was credible and who wasn't, and
who was hot and who was not.
And releasing a single was a sellout enough. Never mind having a hit. It would have been interesting to see that other fork in the road had it been like that.
There's a bit in the Richard Lowenstein, Roland doco.
Yep.
There's a couple of guys, Carl and Mick from the Ears, basically going, well, everyone made a single. He said, the Boys Next Door made an album and then they went to England. It's like, that was the kind of difference, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about, speaking of singles, probably what might be regarded as your kind of breakthrough single in some ways, Release the Bats, that was done with Nick Launay. When I really liked it at the time, but when I hear it now, it kind of feels like you're having a bit of a laugh at the audience and yourselves. Was that track sort of recorded as a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, or am I completely missing the point?
Most definitely. I think it was a bit of a kind of poke at the thing that we were starting to be labelled as being goth.
Mm.
And I think it also fed a little bit off the rockabilly, psychobilly kind of thing that was going around at the time. Kind of the Stray Cats, but kind of other bits around that. But at the same time, it was a genuine. I think it was I don't think you can ever forget that the birthday party was full of humour, and a lot of people miss that. I don't think you can. We were often having a rollicking good time ourselves with the songs, with the subject matter, without and we were kind of laughing about this stuff while we were doing it, as we were doing it, and so not a lot of people kind of get that kind of thing. So I don't think it was a total let's stick the knife in and twist it kind of attitude kind of thing, but I think there was certainly elements of that, and I don't think it's our finest piece of work by a long shot.
The fun aspect of it did occur to me listening to your oeuvre in recent times. And, a song like Happy Birthday, for instance, is just hilarious, I think.
Yeah. It's supposed to have that kind of crazy hijinks kind of, it's like wacky, uplifting kind of thing about it. I think that, we're cast in such a dark place so much of the time, and I don't think that any of us in the band really thought of ourselves in that place at that point. I think that the journalists, particularly the UK rock press, did a lot to put us in that box, or want to put us in that box. And I think that I think one of Nick's great, what can I say? Difficulties at that whole time was constantly being misquoted in the press, or being, put into a box, or having things he said made up to make stuff that he hadn't said. And I think that's where he developed his disdain for the journalistic crew.
There is a certain Australian sense of irony and dry sense of humour, which on the page...
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Can I ask, when did it stop becoming fun for you? I kind of feel like the excessive drug and alcohol use of the other members of the band started towards the end, because you seem to be the organiser and the fixer, of things.
I disagree with that. I mean, look, the other thing the movie does is cast this kind of sort of like, great divide between those who did and those who didn't, which was a thing. But, let's not say that, the concept that Mick Harvey or I were not taking drugs is ridiculous. It just becomes your choice of drugs. And if you've been around drugs, you'll know how that kind of goes. It never stopped being fun for me up until the minute I got the sad missive that I was no longer in the band. So I was in it, up to my guts until the minute I wasn't. And I think that the process about the band's disintegration is kind of like I think calmly and well put. I think it was a thing that you had to break the thing that was there to make the next thing. And I think that was like you had to try the bit without me to get to the bit with just the 4-piece, and then you had to arrive at the bit where the chemistry wasn't working between Nick and Roland, and then you had to arrive at the point where Nick was basically going, I'm not going to work on that. I don't want to be part of that. I think I've got to say the thing where they got rid of me and then they got to the next stage and they did that first EP, The Bad Seed. I reckon that's a really good record. I reckon that really holds great. I think by the time they got to the Mutiny EP, you can almost feel the wheels falling off the billy cart, to me. But I kind of was looking at it from someone who'd already been inside of it, and probably a whole lot of people hoped it was going to keep going forever.
What Beatles song did you propose covering? Was that anything to do with the...
Helter Skelter.
Well, that wouldn't have been a bad one, but I thought that might have hastened the departure.
No, I mean, that's a kind of Rolandism, it's like, it's okay. It's okay to suggest a Nina Simone song. It's okay to suggest an Elvis song. And Nick has since, fucking done Beatles songs live. I mean, it's like, where do you come from? You come from a love of music, and you come from a point where you want to do stuff that's interesting and see, how other people can work with that. So I don't, yeah. I mean, hey, look, more fool me for not being cool enough.
Well, no.
I don't personally view it that way. It's like, which Stones song would you have chosen? I mean, we'll do Sympathy for the Devil. If you want the good oil. I mean, we rehearsed doing 5 to 1 by the Doors, but we never did it live.
Helter Skelter is very much at the cool end of the Beatles spectrum. Like, it's a pretty raw and rough song.
Yeah, and shit, imagine we would have done it before U2, but
yeah, well, that was long time. Yeah, I didn't want to mention U2. I thought that wouldn't be helpful.
And you did, of course. If you were at the Q&A at the theatre at Cremorne, you would have heard Ian White say that my codicil, my clause was that I would not be involved if in the film were either Bono or Henry Rollins in it. So I think I at least succeeded with that one.
You did. I do want to say, for what it's worth, once you left, the rhythm section wasn't the same for me. I just felt like something was lacking, and I started to lose interest in the band. And that's not to blow smoke up your ass. It just wasn't the same band. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to throw that in there.
People say that. I've got no... I'm really happy with the stuff I did. I'm really I really... my whole period where I was in that band, it was like, for me, the most important thing that happened to me every day when I got up and, ate my cornflakes or made my coffee or whatever. It was like, that was, what I lived and breathed for that whole time. So, it's important to me. It's cool to me, but, I've done a bunch of stuff since, and I hope to do a bunch of stuff more. But it's not like a debilitating situation that when that ended, my life ended. So it's like I really I'm enjoying the fact that a lot of people that might be getting onto the music, and I'm enjoying the fact that people are enjoying the film, and hopefully getting something of the feel of what the energy was like around that band. And I think that's the thing it's like lightning in a bottle, but that's the thing. Ian's done quite a good job of getting a sense of the time. I've got a friend who went with his kids to see it, and they've heard this music in their household all their life because their dad's like our generation and stuff like that. And the daughter says, "Geez, Dad, I knew it was, I never realized it was that live. My God, what was going on?" It's like it's like, see, if you were there, you've got some kind of a sense of what went on in the room. And people see that section in the video where Nick's on his back in front of the drum kit doing Cry, and I think he's got blood on his lips, and he's, it's like and then he leaps up and fucking goes again. It's amazing. He didn't get fucking end up in hospital. He never did, but it was pretty wild life, man. It was pretty wild.
The utter fearlessness of Nick, which I don't want to get too much into kind of amateur psychology, but perhaps the death of his father, who was such a big figure for him that maybe he'd sort of
we can dance that one around the room all night.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, maybe Nick was fearless before his father died.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I can tell you for certain. He did stuff I would never risk. He was.
Yeah, he certainly wasn't afraid of disappointing his father. Like during.
Well, no, he also he was very fearless of physical injury. I saw him in schoolboy fights in the middle of the oval, and I saw him do, that whole thing of him climbing out of moving cars and trains and stuff is all 100% completely true. And his father was alive at that point in time, so I don't think that you can draw a correlation. I think he was, I think he'd grown up in the country. I think he had, I know, a lot to prove and nothing to lose. I don't know. But, he's a great guy. And as kids, we had a lot of good fun together. He and I shared a lot of great camaraderie, even some stuff around the time of his father's death, which is a bit personal to me. And he's probably forgotten, but it doesn't matter. It's like, I mean, I remember with all of those guys, particularly Tracy, because he and I, we moved out of home together, and we got our first flat together, and we chased similar girlfriends together and stuff. And times, when we were 18 and junk like that, and it's really nice that there's some kind of presence of him within the film, and it makes me have very fond recollections of all the great times, and such a funny guy. Oh my God, fuck, you would just laugh yourself to death if you met that man. He was phenomenal. But anyway, they you get a little bit of that in the movie, and I think that's really good. He's I did a Q&A for WA late last week and stuff, and his sister was in the audience, and that was really lovely.
Do you find it amazing that you are still talking about this these years in your life for something nearly 40 years ago that people are so interested and want to know? Does that just blow you away?
I think it's wonderful, I'm surprised and amazed. I'm happy about it. I'm not like going, oh, I wish I was back there because it was the best moment of my entire life. I'm very, happy with how things turned out for me and mine, and that's all great. But I think it's a lovely, I think it's kind of cool on a lot of levels. But the thing I hope the most is that if people do see it and they've got no sense of the music, that they go looking for the music, because that's the thing. You and I all grew up thumbing through, albums in record stores going, what's this cover? I don't, play me this, or this is on the same label as this guy that I already like. I don't even know who this is. Play me this, So, that's how I ended up, knowing about, the Modern Lovers, and that's how I ended up knowing about Iggy and the Stooges, and that's how I ended up knowing about the Velvet Underground and things like that. So if people go backwards through the Wayback Machine and find our music, and then that's a conduit to other music, or that's a thing that makes them think about their own music and how they play or what they do or how they approach what they do in their music, then that would be more exciting for me than someone making a movie about a band I used to be in. So I mean, it's cool that it's happening. I like it on that level. But if people get into the music, that's much more exciting for me, because it's like when you find a crazy old Art Blakey record from 1954 or 5 that you never heard before, and there's this great version of fucking 9 Inch Nails or something. They go, wow, Jesus, listen to that. That's like, that's digging around in record stores.
One last question from me. I didn't dare see you at the start of 82 in the birthday party, but I did dare see you in the Psychedelic Furs at the end of 82 at the Pier Hotel in Frankston, which is not a place I ever expected to see the Psychedelic Furs play, out of suburban Melbourne gig. Was there any particular highlights from your time in Psychedelic Furs, and do you remember anything much about that tour?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that tour, it was one of these things where, and it happened around that time, the English bands worked out that you could be a middleweight kind of act, and you could come to Australia and you could hit the pub circuit here right through summer, nothing happening in England, freezing cold. You can come out here, it's warm, there's beer, you get $1,000 a night, you get, whatever, the packed houses, you can stay in motels, you drive around, there's, and a load of bands did it. The Cure did it, Susie and the Banshees did it, and either side, earlier magazine had done and people, it became, the Stranglers came out and played huge shows here. People loved them, we Love My Way had gone number 1 in New Zealand. And so there was a big music festival there outside of Auckland, an outdoor thing called Sweetwater. And we went and did that. And because we were down there, they said, you can come over and do 4 or 5 shows. So we did Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. Did we do Adelaide? Yeah. And then we were here. And so one of the touring, booking agencies said, I can book you another 20 shows. We had nothing to go back to the States because it was cold and freezing in New York and snowing. And we were halfway through a tour in America. And so they put on another 20 shows here, and we did them. And the band loved it. Look, I really like that band. It's a long short story about how I ended up in that band. But it was a similar situation where my demise in that band was fueled by the thing that I wanted to go, hey, let's push it and be much more adventurous, much more like their first couple of records. They wanted to go much more down the straight. They were really trying to angle for a pop career here in the United States, and they'd appointed a record producer to do just that, who was the guy who'd just done Don't You Forget About Me for Simple Minds.
Yeah, Keith Forsyth.
Massive hit. And so they were just going. And so basically on his say-so, he said, look, we'll just do a program all drum machines and everything like that. You can just lose that cat and we'll pick up another touring drummer. And so I was out. That was it. But the whole of that tour was phenomenal. And sadly, let's not bring the show down too much, but today I received an email from the lead singer of the Psychedelic Furs, Richard Butler, to tell us that the saxophone player who has been playing with them since that tour in 1983 passed away today. So Miles Williams is no longer with us, and the funniest fucking guy you will ever meet, and awesome tenor saxophone player, and lead his band. But anyway, that was really bummed me out today. But anyway, go Mars. Yeah. I hope you're flying to the stratosphere of saxophonia.
Well, I think we've come to the end, Phill. I just want to say it was a real honour to speak to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad we got there.
Fun, okay.
No, I'm really glad that we got there in the end, and I'm sure you're a busy man. But it's as I said, for that 17-year-old kid that saw you play that gig that night, it's a personal highlight in my life to speak to you. So thank you.
I got to say, those 2 summers where we came back to Australia and played those shows, they were always a highlight for us because we got to reconnect with everyone. But it was always such a freaking, rollicking good time to be able to, get up and play in Australia, because the audiences here are by far, the best in the fucking world. And I'll tell you a funny story about your fear of the gig, and also your fear of the gig is that I was talking to Bernard Zuhl, who's a and he was basically saying the same thing. He said, I was this, young kid, and he said, I was so intrigued and stuff, but I was too scared. He said that I was too scared to go see you, and I was too scared to go see Midnight Oil.
I wouldn't compare those two. Wow.
Well, I was more scared of Midnight Oil's road crew than I was of the band, but that's another story. But it's like, I go, wow, that's crazy. I never, and then you hear other people say, oh yeah, I was there. It was weird and it was fearful. Well, once the band started, it was like insane. You were still scared, but at least it was music.
It sure was. No, it was an amazing gig. Everything about it is stuck in my mind, and I'll never forget it. So thank you for that.
All right,
and for the records.
Keep buying the records and all that stuff.
We'll do.
I really, I enjoyed this interview process. It's really kind of easy and fun. And I'm sorry the camera bombed out on the second half of the thing, but it's really nice chatting with you guys. And
fantastic to talk to you.
Genuine appreciation of. The shit we did back then. So thanks.
No, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Phill.
Keep up the good work. We'll keep an eye out for what you're doing down the track as well. The sculpting.
Don't forget my sculptures.
Yes. You want to show us a sculpture?
See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Phill. Thank you.